Aloha. This is Representative Joe Jordan. We're here with Jordan's Journal, and we're on our second half of the discussion on Ordnance Reef, a demonstration project that was just completed in the last few weeks. And we're going to be discussing the first half of that. My guest today is Dr. Eric DeCarlo from the University of Hawaii, Manoa, and Robert O'Conner with NOAA's Fisheries. Good afternoon.
Aloha.
Yeah, aloha. So we just got done discussing with JC and John regarding the project itself. And JC was kind of describing that they had done some studies prior to getting the roamers down there and doing some work. So my understanding in 2006 there was some studies on the ocean floor and
Right. Well, I guess in 2006 NOAA was charged by the Department of Defense to do a rapid screening level assessment of the Ordnance Reef area. And the late Mike Overfield was in charge of that project, and he invited us, University of Hawaii, my research group, to participate in that study. And there was a fair amount of work done, but it was done quickly. It was done over just several weeks. Wow. There was a bunch of side scan sonar work done to identify munitions over quite a large area, actually. Wow. Ranging from right off of Pukai Bay to depths of nearly 300 feet. We did some water sampling, we did some sediment sampling, and then NOAA participated, the local NOAA people participated as well, collecting some fish to analyze, and the materials were all analyzed for explosives, energetics, a whole series of compounds associated with munitions, and we did a lot of trace metal analysis of the sediments, then there was a report written up, and generally the consensus was that there was not an immediate threat from the munitions that were out there. Probably the gravest danger would be from people handling these materials, which pretty much makes sense. Yeah. But there was a few shortcomings to doing something that quickly. The first of which being that it's a snapshot in time. So the chemical analyses basically looked at the conditions at that time. And then the fish that were collected were interesting, but they were not necessarily the food items that the Waianae community members consume. So there were a few concerns about the results, and one of the things I'd like to point out, that was in 2006, and early that year we'd had an extremely rainy, unusually rainy period from February to April. And one of the things that we found out right away is that that particular rain event caused a lot of runoff. It overloaded the sewage treatment plant, so they had an awful lot of material being piped out there. And all of those things played into what we observed. So we were pretty much in agreement that conditions that we observed might not have been very representative. The beauty of that study, however, is that it gave us a good idea of where to go. Wow. And it was a great collaboration. Mike Overfield was a fantastic person with whom to work. It's unfortunate that he's passed on, but the work has been continued since, and Robert can maybe describe some of the things that they were doing this year earlier before the current study.
So that study was then taken back to the military and back to the community, and that's where you're saying the community put some input saying, well, we didn't eat that particular species, or you know, and with the over rain and the different runoff from the wastewater treatment plant, you kind of felt that it wasn't really good data?
Well, the data were quite good. It's just that they were maybe not necessarily representative of how the conditions are normally, because it was an unusual time period. So not only the community, but the Department of Health, the city and county, and EPA all reviewed those documents after the military and some of the other government agencies independent from the military reviewed it, and they basically, their preliminary finding is they did not see an immediate human health problem with the situation. But I've lived in Hawaii for over 30 years, and there are big seasonal differences. I'm a water person, I'm a surfer and a sailor, and Obviously in Waianae, the winter and the summer are very different.
Very
the wave
different,
regimes
very
are different.
Mm-hmm.
The rainfall is very different. And so then the Department of Defense came back, actually the Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Army's Office for Environmental Safety and Occupational Health asked us to come back and do another study that would address some of these data gaps. So with input from the Ordnance Reef Coordination Council, which was organized by the Deputy Assistant Secretary's office, so it consisted of community members, members of the neighborhood boards, agency representatives, and other interested parties. We determined what questions we needed to address and what approach would be taken. So the follow-up study involved going out and sampling the area again at 2 different seasons. Yeah. And with community input, we selected a variety of different organisms that we would show. And actually, William Isla, who was the harbor master at the time, had recommended that we use local fishermen to help us collect these food items. So we settled on he'e, octopus, limu kohu as a seaweed. We looked at veke as fish. And then we also collected kona crabs. And the we here is actually Carl Jellings and his crew. These guys are absolutely fantastic. Working with them was just great. And they took some underwater photos, actually. Here we have well, this is a surface photo of Keo Lopes, a student at the University of Hawaii, trying to put one of the he'e into a plastic bag after Carl Jellings' crew would bring it up. And we discovered very quickly that they prefer to leave containers than go into them. But the sampling was very, very successful. And then we analyzed all of those organisms. And we're still putting together that report because the results of all those analyses have gone on to be used in a human health risk assessment and an ecological risk assessment. And those results have not yet come out.
So you were testing more of the consumables, what we would probably eat off the ocean floor.
Yes, we did that, and we also looked at the sediment and the water, and we looked at different areas. Since the data from 2006 showed that there could be some potential inputs from land, we felt that it was important to try to separate out, if we could, contributions from, say, non-point source pollution runoff. There are a lot of runoff channels from when it rains. The wastewater treatment plant outfall, which is right there. And then, of course, the military dump area, the disposed munition area. And then, upon recommendation of the community members, we chose the area near Black Rock or Manalahi as a control area where there's a vibrant reef, there's sand patches, but there are no military munitions. So we compared and contrasted all of those areas. And then now that the Rumors demonstration project has taken place, we're going to be going out and sampling again, and we're going to be examining the areas that NOAA had mapped. And I guess you folks were looking at the coral abundances, and
so then, so NOAA came in at pretty much simultaneously on the effects of the munitions with the coral or possible coral interactions.
Right. In late 2010, we went out and came up with a coral avoidance and mitigation plan. Basically went out, did dozens of dives on the sites that they were thinking about removing munitions, and took still videos, still pictures, high-definition video, and tried to prioritize sites where they should go and remove munitions. These would be sites where there's less coral cover but lots of munitions, as opposed to high coral cover areas, which there are out there, and few munitions. So we tried to just figure out priority sites in the work areas that they had already decided on.
So most people understand that there's coral out there, but I guess they don't really understand how protected coral is. Could you kind of explain a little bit of that and how that kind of played into with the munitions?
Well, there was one interesting aspect with the coral growth is that a lot of these munitions had been down there for a long time. So there's actually coral growing on the munitions, anything from small juvenile corals that were just growing to large coral heads. So we wanted them to stay away from those actual munitions and just leave them alone and stick to the munitions that didn't have as much coral growing on them. Munitions that had maybe just macroalgae growing on them or just no coral at all.
So then your portion of the project was to say, okay, in this area, these have specific growths on them, so we'd prefer you to stay away from those, or this area, the munitions are away from coral heads or growth, and it'd be easier to access them.
Right. So we tried to document individual munitions using GPS floating on the surface of the water, taking photos and linking that GPS point to those photos.
Wow.
So a very precise idea of where the munitions were that should be removed, and a very good idea of where the good coral areas were.
And then my understanding is while they were actually conducting the demonstration project with the roamer down there, then NOAA was also side by side with...
we weren't literally side by side because we didn't want to be around when they were actually touching the munitions.
Yeah.
But we do have the video that we're reviewing now, which we can use to go back out now that the project's over and take a look at what has been done, where the munitions have been removed, and see if there might have possibly been any coral damage.
Any damage, and then mitigation efforts for that, or
Right.
how do we go forward if they're going to do future, demonstrations.
Exactly.
And,
We're also going to take a close look at the mooring sites for the barge and the boat that actually had the ROV on it. These boats were using really large anchors. I think they're about 2,000 pounds.
Wow.
So before they actually parked the vessels, we went out and mapped the sites that looked like proper places for them to drop these anchors, mostly sandy areas. And our priority right now is to go back out and see those exact sites where the anchors were and see if there was any impacts.
So that's what NOAA normally does. They make sure that the ocean floor remains as is and to do less damage
Correct.
than...
A big
what
part
we're
of my
doing.
job is going to do response whenever there's a ship grounding. So we'll go out and use similar techniques to map out the vessel scar of where the ship was actually sitting before it was removed. And then we try to map out the damage and then figure out a cost to the value of the corals, and then come up with a proper mitigation plan.
So that's what we're trying to do ahead of time, to say, hey, keep this to a dull
Try to
roar.
limit as much coral damage as possible.
Was there a lot of coral growth on munitions, or there?
There was a good amount, and there was also munitions that were just actually cemented to the bottom just because the coral had grown around it. But there was also a fair amount of munitions that were just freestanding that were easily removed.
Or accessible. Oh, so then your part was to go out there and test all the...
So yeah, we're going to follow up basically on what we have done before. Some of the results of the analyses that we've done are still under review for the results of the work prior to this demonstration project. And what we're going to do now is go back. You saw in the previous segment that the rumors operators were very carefully mapping and getting GPS locations of where they remove munitions. So we're going to go specifically back to those locations, just like they will be looking at the potential coral damage, if any. We're going to be sampling in those areas to see what the effect was of removing the munitions. Now, it was fairly obvious from the video that was shown earlier that some of these munitions were partially degraded and some material falls. So we do expect that we're going to find, if nothing else, a transient signal of some munition constituents that have fallen on the seafloor or were left on the seafloor. And then we will go back again later, again following this seasonal approach, and reevaluate maybe 6 months or a year later to see how the area has evolved after the removal of these munitions. And one of the things I'd like to say is this study is the overall project is really the way to go. Community involvement, multiple agency involvement, rigorous scientific approach, and everybody taking everybody else's advice and working collaboratively. This, to me, has been the best example of an environmental remediation type of action that I've ever witnessed. And so I really want to commend the community for being willing to participate, the agencies, NOAA, EPA, DOH, and all of the people that have been involved. It's been absolutely a fantastic experience.
It really has. I mean, some people are now finding out about, Ordnance Reef and this demonstration project, and they're like, wow, that just happened? And you're like, no, I mean, this has been in planning stages since 2003. And as we kept going through this process, there was more and more agencies involved, and the collaboration and listening to one agency, talking to another, or maybe a community member bringing in input. And I mean, I could clearly see from the tests in '06 to when you came back and we did more tests and taking that information and mulling it into, oh, let's change up the testing and the products. And I mean, and how that has also been delivered to the community and kind of stifled a lot of the misconceptions that was going out there. And
it was great, too, to have all the community meetings and then have all of us there as partners to be able to answer questions. So there wasn't any confusion to what was going on or what the process was. And any community members that wanted to come out were able to ask us freely any questions they had.
And people would say, well, hey, just take it away, get it out of there. But then, if you had Noah standing there saying, well, it might not be able to take it away. I mean, that coral head might be too precious to remove. And what was more important?
Yeah, and everybody had a different opinion. There's people that wanted it all removed. There's people that didn't want anybody to touch it at all. Fearful that they might damage some coral. And then everything in between, there was just different opinions.
Yeah, there really was. So then it's like, it's nice to get all this input from everyone and then say, hey, what is the best procedure going forward? And I think that was the greatest outcome from all of this. And, and then making the assurance to the community that the levels that you were testing, my understanding, almost all of them were below any normal.
Well, we found that except right at specific munitions, EPA had prioritized sites just as NOAA did for removal or leave alone based on coral cover. EPA had prioritized where we wanted to go. People who know the waters out in Waianae know that there's not sediment everywhere, so we couldn't apply the typical approaches of EPA remedial investigations, where you go and you sample sediment all over the place and you make composites. And we had to take a different approach, and with the community input, the agency input, great communications, we were able to target certain areas that were of high priority. And, not surprising, we did find that there were some munition constituents in some areas, but we also found that, this is a pretty vibrant reef overall. And so it was really good news in that respect. And this is why I think the follow-up is going to be even more telling, because now we'll see the evolution from prior, so regular environment behaving on its own over seasonal changes, and then a demonstration removal action, what immediate effect that had, and then again a natural system evolving. So as a scientist, to me, this has been an absolute dream come true type of a study, because we've had the opportunity to look at this system for quite a long time, and we'll continue to do so for a while. And then serving the community as a state employee, a professor at the university, it is my job to provide a service to the community. So this is it's been a great experience.
Yeah, and it was like a win-win for the community, because not only were we getting a demonstration project that could remove some of these munitions, we also got this data. And this data can be used at multiple levels. We can disclaim a bunch of stuff and then say, well, yeah, the wastewater treatment, we're getting these kind of levels, can't blame everything. And then more so it proves, we get the runoffs from the rains. And I mean, we got more than we really thought we were ever going to get from this. And then they also had the different sonars out there taking the wave action on if some of the chemicals, where would they go? And it was just fascinating to get all this particular data, and then being able to share that with the community, and now being able to come back and say,
Well, the current study was another wonderful collaborative effort with between NOAA and some of my colleagues at the university who are physical oceanographers, looking at the currents and where materials might be transported if there was a release out there. So I think the community is getting a great scientifically rigorous study out of this, and the Army, in my opinion, have done the right thing here, addressing the community's needs. You're never going to satisfy everybody, because that's just the nature of,
Yes.
of the way things go.
Yeah.
But I think this has been a good step forward. It's also, I think, a good model to apply in other locations. So the Waianae community immediately benefit,
Yes.
the agencies and the scientists benefit, and I think also now the Department of Defense have a model that they can apply
Yes,
in other areas,
exactly.
because there are many other areas in the world where munitions have been disposed. So I think it's been really good in that respect.
It's been awesome because we're kind of like on the cutting edge of everything. I mean, we're developing this going, just like they built the roamer to do this in the ocean floor. You know, all these steps that we're taking is all developing a process, because I'm sure there's other munitions in other areas of the world, and now they've got this little template that they can take to other places and say, this is how you can involve the different agencies and the community members and, you know, as the government agency, and how they can mold that all and just take this little template and go to different areas. I thought it was a great process. And we're not finished with it, that's obvious. We're going to have another community meeting just to update the community on what has transpired over this project. And then when your data starts coming back, you know, you're going to come back and talk to the community about that. And then when NOAA gets their report in, you know, see how it's gone out. And I think we're in an ongoing process, but it's been awesome.
Yeah, the community outreach component, of which I've played no part other than showing up at meetings, I think has been really good too. The contractors, the Native Hawaiian veterans, and
yes.
other people involved have really done a great job. The neighborhood board meetings, the special meetings, have been good. It's been good for me to hear, you know, the views all across the spectrum, from the ultra-conservative to the ultra-activist,
Yes.
and try to put it all in context, and then see these people actually come together and work together rather than just argue with each other.
Yeah, argue about it. I think they all saw a common theme, and you do. You had your extremists, and you're the ones that would say, "Oh, don't touch," and how we all came to a certain level, and it was really interesting with Native Hawaiian veterans. They came out and they did the educational component of it. And they were at all the meetings, and they did the community outreach, and then they went into the schools and set up the educational component with that, and, you know, how to do the 3 R's. And it's not your educational 3 R's, it's the, you know, recognize, retreat, and report. You know, you recognize what it is. If it doesn't look like it belongs there, then it's not. You know, if it's shiny and it's in the water, that doesn't belong there. So then you would actually retreat from it, you don't pick it up, and then when you get back to shore, you would place your 911, tell them where it is, just like you guys did your coordination, where everything was, and you report to the military, here, this munition is here, you know, and when we go back and they picked it up, then NOAA will go back out there and look at that coordinate. So that was a great 3 R's that we had, and we still remind the youth and the adults out there what you need to do with that. And it's kind of like you guys did that. We recognized, we retreated, we reported it, and they did the work, and now we're going to go back out and check it out and see what the results are afterwards. I think it's been really, really pleasant to work with everybody. I mean, when you talk about from 2003 to now it's now 2011, but it's been well worth it. Just really
Well, there's
well
been
worth it.
an incredible evolution of attitudes as well as work that has been done.
Yes.
And as I mentioned earlier, I mean, the body of information that has been collected out here is, I'm not sure people really comprehend the scope and the technology development. I think this has been a fantastic investment and a great experiment. As a scientist, we love experiments, of course. And I think that this model is really one to follow. And there are obviously other locations where we need to do this. And I've really enjoyed working with the other agencies. A lot of times as scientists we sometimes get isolated in our ivory tower and do our own little thing. And this has taught me to work with other people. So I've benefited tremendously from it as well.
It's been really nice. I mean, I guess the Army, DOD realized, you know, where we're at. We were blessed to be picked as one of the locations, and I feel they've done an excellent job. They really have. They've listened to the community, and, you know, they've done the right thing, I see right here. And some people might not agree with that, but I believe they have, you know, and we're just the next step in the process. And I hope to be working more with you folks. I mean, got lots to do, you know. It'd be nice to hear what those reports are. And
well, we're on track for our seasonal study, not the post-demonstration study, but that seasonal study, all the data have come in, and the risk assessment parts are now just starting to come out and undergoing review. And so we're hoping that before the end of the year that there should be public information available after all of the relevant agencies have had an opportunity to review these data and the findings, because that's the other thing that's fantastic, the level of scrutiny of the results and of our interpretations of those results is very, very substantial, and will ensure that we have really sound data being released. So.
We're kind of running short on time. I'd like to thank you, Eric and Rob.
Thank you very
for
much.
joining us. You know, I'd also like to let everybody know that there's a Facebook page out there for Ordnance Reef for additional information, and they have some other sites on there that you can go to get further information on the project. And as it comes up, it'll all be posted. As you're saying, you know, everything has been very transparent, and once it's scrutinized, it's put out there for the public's process. And I think that's been really great. I'd like to say thank you to everybody. Thank you for joining me at Jordan's Journal, and I look forward to seeing you all real soon. Aloha.